Hello, Chris Sexton here, member of Team Heli Pros. I'm known on the Heli Freak forums as CD Sexton. When I built my original E7, I did a really intricate picture build and review of the build, and it went really well. Synergy is still, of all the birds I've ever flown, including my new Whiplash, the Synergy is still my favorite helicopter. I can't really put my finger on why. I love the way it flies, love the way it builds, love the low parts count. I just love the involvement of the owner on the forums. It's just a really fantastic build. In my mind, a high quality TDR Diablo rivaling helicopter at Gowie pricing. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I love this helicopter. The original Synergy E6 E7 was released as a belt in both the 600 and the 700 model. Well, here last week, earlier, I guess towards the end of April, Matt Bodos and Synergy released a torque tube conversion kit for it. I was one of the original naysayers against the belt. I had some initial problems with the belt. Those did turn out to be me over tightening the belt. Another friend of mine who's much more experienced with belts and bigger helis helped me go through the setup on the belt, and it didn't give me any problems after that. That being said, though, the rest of my birds are torque tube. I'm just more comfortable with torque tube. I was in line for the torque tube conversion kit, and here it is. I thought I would take a few moments after I enjoyed doing the build video on my Whiplash, so I thought I would put together a build video of my torque tube conversion. Now, the Synergy E7 is already built. The helicopter we're upgrading here today has been flying since the fall. Absolutely love it. Got well over 100 flights on it. This is going to be the conversion to that. If you want to see the build pictures of this, it's on the Heli Freak forums and the Synergy E7 electric helicopter section. This is going to be a build video of the upgraded torque tube. Take a quick minute to go through what they send you. Main shaft, torque tube itself, carbon fiber control rod, boom supports, boom clamps, main gear head. Those are all main shaft, linkage, tail rotor hub and grips. Those are all carried over from the belt drive. Of course, the main fuselage as well. Things you get that are new. We have this nice aluminum and carbon fiber front transmission. That's pretty beefy. These are mod 1.25 gears in this bird. These are absolutely, and they're machined Delrin. They're not molded. Very, very well built. Should handle a beating. I'm gonna be pulling this all apart. I've noticed none of this Loctite. I can move them all by hand. That's fine. I wouldn't assume it was Loctite anyway. I am going to be going through that. The original bird had a carbon fiber tail case to go along with the belt. Carbon fiber with CNC aluminum clamps and a rear belt drive. Worked really, really well. I didn't have any problems with it, with the tail case anyway, but this pesky belt was giving me troubles for a while. With the new torque tube setup, Matt Bodos decided to go with an all aluminum tail case, and this thing is massive. It does add a little bit to the overall length. In fact, they give us some new ends for our carbon fiber control rod should we need to lengthen it a little bit. I'm hoping not to, because I epoxied those things in good. I may be buying some carbon tube tomorrow. We'll see. All easy to take apart, machined aluminum. I've got two halves to the body. The main bulk of the tail box is all one piece of CNC aluminum. Again, mod 1.25 gears here. Nice big. You've got set pins with set screws on the pins going down through the shaft. Locks those guys in solid. Radial bearings on the inner and outer on this front crown gear. And they give you everything you need. New main shaft, new pivot point, tail case, all the screws. The original front auto gear was for the belt, obviously a pulley. Well, they have given us a new one, aluminum hub with the CNC Delrin, again mod 1.25 I believe, CNC Delrin auto rotation drive gear, and a new collar for that, as well as the torque tube tips and the torque tube itself. Now, the nice thing about this kit, As with the E6, E7 kit originally, the torque tube conversion kit does give you the parts to build this bird, either 600 or 700. And realistically, with this setup, the only difference is the length of the torque tube. So you can do either way. I will probably be holding on to the 600 parts just because I'm considering building a 600 Nightbird. If I do, it'll be a Synergy, so I'll be ready for my torque tube. A few extra pieces to buy, and I'll be ready to go. Worst case scenario, I'll have spares. Torque tube bearings, of course. Now these are more, this is becoming more popular. I really thought people would adopt more of a Alliance philosophy, but these are holding up okay on my Whiplash and the Synergy, and the Gowie should be alright. It's a plastic holder holding the torque tube bearing with rubber O-rings. Lube those up before you put them in. The torque tube ends are nut and bolt on each side, should hold it real well. And you do get a new tail fin. Since the case is different, it has a new hole for pinning the boom. This was the fin on the belt drive was the back half of the tail case. So they had to give you a new fin because it's no longer structurally part of the tail case. I'm going to go ahead and cut the camera and pull this apart, double check, Loctite everything, put it back together, double check my set screws on those crown pins, and get this ready to go. When we come back, I'll have this ready, those four bolts out and Loctited. I'm going to take this opportunity to re-lube not only my grips in my tail, but the grips in my head since it's off. I'll do all that off camera. When I come back, I will ready to start assembling the gear. Okay guys, making progress. I'm working on the Loctiting all the bolts on the tail case, and I want to talk about the set screw. Inside the tail shaft, this set screw is probably hard for you to see. There's a set screw, pretty long set screw on a 1.5 millimeter that goes in the end of the tail shaft, and that goes through and holds the pin on the crown gear here. Keeps that pin from sliding out, which is what holds that pin to the shaft. This is not Loctited from the factory. In fact, one guy on the forums, on the Synergy forums, actually posted his was missing this set screw. So make sure you take a little blue Loctite, rub it in a little bit so down the threads, and make sure you're very careful. Don't get the Loctite into the bearing that's around the end of the shaft there. That's why you're going to be careful not to go nuts on the Loctite. Just get the threads wet. Crank that guy down pretty good, because that guy is important. If that backs out and that pin comes out, you lose tail authority. Period. It's going to happen. So double check that for you. Just a little tip. Okay guys, all the parts inspected, checked, Loctite on everything. Double check the set screws on my crown gears here. They are good to go. Tail box is built. Everything Loctite that needs to be. Just this is an optional screw here for the pinning the tail boom. I'm going to put it together without the pins, but I will just because I don't have a drill, I will probably, I've been looking for an excuse to buy an electric drill anyway. I probably will buy an electric drill just for the purpose of pinning this boom, just because I want to be sure it's not going anywhere. Take that out, make a little mark on the boom, and then drill. As long as you're careful to drill through the new torque tube, you can do that after it's built, no problem. Tail goes together really well. I went ahead and put the fin on. I might regret doing that this early, but oh well, it's on. Make sure I Loctited that set screw, Loctite both sides of the frame. Obviously no Loctite on the clamp or the pin, but everything else is tightened up and ready to go. Now these 4 screws on this auto rotation gear, were Loctited, but I don't assume anything. I pulled them and found Loctite on them. Great, I was happy for that. I put them back in with blue Loctite. Your call. The odds are if mine were Loctited, they all were, but I don't trust anything. If I didn't Loctite it, I assume it's not there. So I double check those. Next, what I'm going to do is relube up my tail bearings, build the torque tube. When we come back, I'll have the torque tube in the tube, probably have the tail case on, and we'll be talking about mounting the transmission and the changes to the main shaft and auto rotation hub needed to make this guy work. So that'll be next. Jackpot. I knew this and I completely slipped my mind. Taking the torque tube out of the package, I found not only did they give us new rod ends for the control rod, they gave us a new piece of carbon too. That's cool. I remember reading they did that. I just forgot about it. That's cool. Doesn't look like they gave us new Teflon for the guides, but that's easy. I think I've got some of that around. If not, they're not so sloppy. I'm not horribly worried about it. I'll figure something out. But that's cool. They do give you the control rod carbon. Okay guys, torque tube is built. Torque tube ends on, nut and bolts in. Torque tube bearings on, little CA to hold those on. I read somewhere once in these plastic ones you want to make sure the open end of the bearing is the same, the holder is the same of both torque tube bearings. I guess it's supposed to make it easier to change the bearings if you have to. I'm not sure. Nothing else is going to help when you're pushing the bearing through the tube. Again, make sure that your distance from tip to first bearing, bearing to second bearing, and bearing to tip are all 3 different spans. Just helps keep from resonating vibrations from causing problems. Pretty straightforward, just like most torque tubes. Piece of aluminum looks like, nice and straight. I read that somebody said theirs wasn't true. Mine looks pretty darn true. Ends went on well, no problems at all, so I'm sure I'm good. Okay guys, as you can see, I have my E7 frame, my main fuselage frame, whatever you want to call it here. Got to redo some of my electronics. That won't be a problem. I had to unplug the V-bar. The V-bar control panel was mounted at the top of the boom clamps. Next, we're going to put this transmission in, and right here are the 3 bolts that held the old pulley system in. That's exactly where those go. So this is just going to drop in here. There's 3 on each side, nice 3mm bolts. Hold that, suspend the transmission right there. Oh, I think I've actually got it upside down. Nope, I had it right. Or do I? Double check the diagram on that. I think I may have actually put this in the wrong place. I'll double check the diagram on that. But that goes in here, suspends right there above the frame, and it's pretty straightforward. Actually, I know I did. These 2 are backwards. I'll fix that real quick. It just goes to show, be very careful when you're putting these side frames back together that you get these posts in the right place, because they have to line up the right screws here. I do have this one in the wrong place. Easy fix though, easy fix. Okay, as you can see, I got her in there. Upon further inspection, I did have those posts in the right place. I was just looking at it upside down. It was messing with my head. So there are 3 bolts, 3mm bolts on both sides holding that transmission in. The main gear actually rides below the auto rotation gear, so the transmission's up kind of high. It actually goes exactly where the belt guides went before, so the hole's already there. It was a really neat idea to put that together like that. It works well. Next, what we're going to do is I'm going to be looking at my main shaft, auto rotation gear, auto hub setup. There are some adjustments that need made. Some guys are having to file some off the Delrin shims to get to spin free. So we're going to look at it and adjust mine as needed. When I come back, I'll have the shaft together, ready to put it in the main shaft. I'll have it test fitted first, but I'll show it to you together before I go any further. Alright, as promised, before I put this in the bird, I'm going to show this to you. This system does use 2 Jesus bolts. There's this collar here that gets 1, and then there's a second Jesus bolt that goes through the auto rotation hub in through the hub on the main hub, and then into out the other side for a nut. So basically what happens is this drives like this, and then the gear stops and this whole assembly spins to drive the tail as the head spins down. Obviously I don't have this all put together yet. There's some shims and some adjustments you can make. There's some Delrin shims you can sand if you need to get a little more clearance. Upon just test fitting mine here, I don't know that I'm going to need the clearance. It seems to spin pretty free, doesn't have any play in the gear. I'm not anticipating huge problems, but there is a new collar. Doesn't look like this collar is going to be used anymore, but it does reuse the old Jesus bolts, so make sure you, I don't know why anyone would get rid of them, but make sure you have them handy. Well guys, there it is. Auto rotation drive gear, main gear's in, Auto rotation drive gear spins free, no play in the shaft, no play in the gear. But when the motor turns, it all turns too. The Delrin shims did not need sanded in my case, but I can see how it could. I mean, there used to be a little bit of up and down play on the main gear. That play is almost all gone now. If you were using 2 shims before, you might need to sand one to make it fit, but mine looks good. Collar's tight, both Jesus bolt through. Matt says this several times. I'm going to say it as well. There's no need to really torque down the Jesus bolts. The nylock bolts hold them in place. You just really want to have them be snug. Torquing them down can stretch the bolt, weaken the shoulder bolt, and a lot of strain is on that bolt. I mean, the entire rotating force of the head goes through those 2 shoulder bolts. This one driving the tail in particular. So there's really no reason to tighten those down. So be careful when you're doing that. Don't go ape shit on them. Main shaft passes through into the lower bearing. Good. Upper the new collar does capture the top bearing really well. No slack. Clearances are all good. Nothing interferes. I can go ahead and mount my boom, adjust my length of my carbon tail rod, and start putting the electronics back together. So all in all, the bulk of the conversion is done. Now it's pretty much just tail setup stuff. When we come back, I'll have the tail boom on and probably my electronics together. Well guys, there it is. Torque tube conversion complete. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm not sure how the light's going to handle it. As you can see, we have a Delrin 1.25 mod auto rotation drive gear now. Carbon fiber and aluminum transmission with Delrin CNC machine gear, crown gears. Excuse my tongue, a little bit of my tongue. It uses the same boom I had before. I did have to adjust the length on my control rod a little bit. No big deal. The reason I had to adjust the length of my control rod is the tail hub has completely changed. It's now all CNC aluminum. Again, machine Delrin, massive mod 1.25 gears that my camera is having a hard time focusing on. Just absolutely beautiful. Now what I'm going to do now is go ahead and put my main blades back on. Put this bird back to bed. Now I did take the opportunity while I had it apart, re-lubed the bearings and dampeners in the head. I also re-lubed the bearings in the tail. I went one step further and double checked all my mesh and alignment. The bearings in this motor were oiled just 5 flights before I decided to do this torque tube gear. So I did not bother taking those back apart. Also, now that since I had to mess with the tail geometry, the rod is a different length. I went through the V-bar setup on my tail again to make sure I had maximum endpoints. Get the tail moving in the correct directions. Direction was correct, I just had to set the endpoints again. And then of course, since I had the head completely off, I double checked for level swash, double checked for zero pitch, and double checked my geometry, which of course everything came out perfect. I didn't mess with the length of the links any. Double and triple checked my phasing to make sure it was straight. I am seriously considering doing the KDE mod with the slightly lower head and integrated swash driver. That floating swash driver is my only real beef with this helicopter. It's really finicky, and it takes a couple of attempts to get the phasing right for me. But all in all, a easy upgrade. I'm looking at my clock now. I have right at 2 hours in it, and that includes time taken to stop and film everything. If you weren't doing a video review, you could probably have this conversion done in an hour, hour and a half. Thanks for tagging along, and hope this helps.